Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unravel the mysteries lurking in the shadows and explore the stories that send shivers down your spine. From unsolved crimes to paranormal encounters, from eerie legends to the unknown, we're here to take you on a journey into the unexplained. Every story has layers, and every layer brings us closer to the truth or deeper into the mystery. So grab a seat, turn down the lights, and get ready to dive into the unknown. This is the Deep Dive. Ever get this, shiver down your spine feeling when you see a photo and it just sticks with you?
Oh, yeah, totally.
That's what happened when I first saw the photos from this Dyatlov Pass thing.
Oh, wow, yeah. This case is, it's one of those where the more you learn.
It just gets worse.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not good.
You got these hikers, young, seemed like they were in great shape, found miles from their campsite. And the photos.
And the way they were found, too, right? It's not like...
Yeah, and the way they were found, it's not like they just wandered off and froze. Some of the injuries are just bizarre, like something out of a car crash or something. But in the middle of nowhere.
That's the thing that always gets me, is how it throws out all the usual explanations right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this isn't just a case of someone getting lost or succumbing to the elements. There's something else going on.
Something weird.
For sure.
So today we're going deep on this one, folks. And we've got some really interesting sources you guys sent in. One's like this crazy detailed research paper, and then there's this other one. It's written almost like a detective novel. Really interesting stuff. So we're going to try to make sense of it all.
And hopefully help people kind of cut through some of the noise around this case, because there's a lot out there.
So much noise.
Yeah.
All right, so you want to kick us off with some background, set the stage?
Yeah, so picture this. 1959, Soviet Union, dead of winter. You've got this group of 10 hikers, most of them students, some engineers, and they're on this 200-mile trek through the Ural Mountains.
The Urals, those are brutal, even in good weather.
Yeah, okay, these are serious mountains. And these hikers, they weren't exactly strangers to tough conditions. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, they weren't just like some weekend warriors. From what I was reading in the sources, these guys were taking trains, trucks, even horse-drawn sleighs to reach the starting point of this expedition.
They were committed, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting, right? Before they even hit the really treacherous stuff, one of the hikers, Yuri Yudin, he has to turn back.
What happened?
Some kind of, I think it was a flare-up of an old injury, if I'm remembering correctly, something that was going to slow him down.
It makes you wonder.
I know, right? He's literally in the last photo ever taken of the group.
So the rest of them, they kept going.
They kept going, and that's where the real mystery begins.
Because weeks go by, no word. And these are experienced hikers, so that's already a bad sign. Eventually, they send out search parties. And that's when they find the group's campsite. But it's not what you'd expect.
Definitely not your typical lost in the woods situation.
Not at all. So we're talking shredded tent, gear everywhere, half-eaten meal. What else did they find at the campsite?
Well, right outside the tent. This is where it gets even weirder. They found footprints.
Okay, footprints. Makes sense. They walked somewhere.
Yeah. But these footprints, they were made by people who were barefoot. We're just wearing socks.
Hold up. Barefoot. In the snow. In those mountains.
I know, right? It defies all logic. It was freezing.
Were they delirious or something? Did something chase them out of there? It's the big question, right? And the footprints, they tell even more of the story. They weren't running. The hikers were walking in an orderly line. So it's not like they were in a full-blown panic, at least not at first.
Okay, so maybe they were trying to be smart about it, stay calm, even though they didn't have the right gear. But where were they even going? Did the footprints lead them anywhere?
About half a mile from the tent, the search party found another clue. Under a bunch of pine trees. A makeshift campfire.
Okay.
And that's where they found the first two bodies. Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonyshenko.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And this is where the details go from strange to truly disturbing.
What do you mean?
These two hikers, by the fire, they weren't just underdressed. They were practically naked. Some of the sources describe them with no shoes, no hats, in temperatures that could kill you in hours. It's like they left the tent with only seconds to spare, like they were running for their lives. Did the sources say anything about why they might do that?
Well, they both go into all the different theories, which we'll get to, but there's one more thing about the campsite I should mention. The pine tree where they found the bodies. There were signs that someone, or maybe a few of them, had been climbing it.
Climbing the tree? Why would they? Why would anyone climb a tree in the middle of the night in freezing temperatures?
Some people think they were trying to get a better look around, maybe to get their bearings or look for help. I don't know. It's just One of those details that just adds to the mystery.
Okay, so we've got a cut open tent, a barefoot trek through the snow, a desperate climb up a tree in the dark, and then the other hikers. What happened to them?
Right, so the rest of the hikers were found further down the slope, and some of them seemed like they were trying to make it back to the tent. These ones were better dressed, which makes their deaths even more confusing.
Confusing how?
Because they also froze to death, even though they were closer to their supplies and shelter.
Wait, hold on a second. Something's not adding up. Why would they leave the tent, which had to be warmer than being outside, only to turn back later? And if they had time to get dressed, why didn't the first two guys by the fire? It's like they were working with totally different information or something.
And it gets weirder. Weeks later, they found the final 4 hikers in a ravine much farther from the campsite, and their cause of death was totally different.
You're killing me. We've gone from freezing to death to what else could have killed them out there?
These hikers, they hadn't just died. They had massive internal injuries, like broken ribs, fractured skulls. One of them even had a missing tongue. The medical examiner said it was like something you'd see in a car crash.
A car crash? But
No.
there weren't any cars. Not for miles. That's just bizarre.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to talk theories now because this is starting to sound like one of those X-Files episodes, car crash injuries in the middle of the wilderness. Yeah, I get why people jump to like Bigfoot and UFOs with this one.
It's definitely a case that attracts those kinds of theories.
So how do we even start to make sense of this?
Well, that more skeptical source you sent in, it really focuses on natural explanations, like maybe some of the evidence was misinterpreted. But even your Sherlock Holmes source, they admit that some of this stuff is just hard to explain.
Yeah, like, what about the radioactive clothes they found on some of the hikers? That's got to be a clue, right? I mean, this was the Cold War, right? Secret government stuff.
I get it. It's a detail that makes you wonder. But both of the sources, they emphasize how important it is to stick to the facts. And it turns out the hikers with the radioactive clothes, they'd both worked with radioactive materials before the trip.
So not so much a Cold War conspiracy as like an occupational hazard.
Exactly. But it does make you think, right? About how even seemingly small details can take on a whole new meaning in a case like this.
Okay, so case closed on the KGB then, I guess. But what about a more, I don't know, a more normal explanation for everything else? What about that avalanche theory? They've been talking about those a lot lately. Could that explain the injuries, them running out of the tent, all of it?
You're talking about those delayed slab avalanches, right?
Yeah, those ones.
That's the theory that seems to be gaining the most traction lately, and it does make sense in some ways. Think about it. The hikers, they set up camp, exhausted, probably just wanting to get warm and eat. They're on this slope, and above them is this huge slab of snow, just waiting to break loose.
Okay, so they're asleep, totally unaware, and then boom, avalanche. Yeah, that would definitely explain why the tent was ripped open and why they ran out into the night, even leaving all their stuff behind.
Right. And remember those really awful internal injuries, the ones that look like a car crash?
Yeah.
A giant slab of snow and ice hitting you. That could definitely do that kind of damage.
But wouldn't the snow have buried them? I mean, some of those hikers were found so far from the campsite, and why were some of them barely dressed if they had time to react to an avalanche? Wouldn't they have tried to get more clothes?
And that's the problem with this theory, and honestly with a lot of the theories about this case. It explains some things, but not everything. A delayed slab avalanche could explain the panic, the injuries, even why they ran out of the tent. But it doesn't explain why some of them were found miles away, or why they would have gone out there so unprepared for the weather. It doesn't quite fit.
Ugh, back to square one then. This is where I'd just be like, it was aliens! And call it a day.
Well, there's one more theory we should talk about. It's not aliens, but, well, it's still pretty creepy.
Okay, hit me. What is it? What's got the skeptics all convinced?
Carbon monoxide poisoning. Remember, the hikers were using a homemade stove in the tent to stay warm. What if something went wrong? Like a malfunction or a blocked vent? It could have caused carbon monoxide to build up without them even realizing it.
Carbon monoxide. Yeah, both of the sources did mention how dangerous those stoves could be. And it's odorless, right? You can't smell it.
Exactly. They might not have even known it was happening until it was too late.
So maybe they cut their way out of the tent thinking they couldn't breathe, trying to get fresh air, not even realizing they were heading out into an even worse situation. It's awful to think about, but it could explain why they didn't have the right clothes. Maybe they weren't thinking straight.
And sadly, it wouldn't be the first time hikers have died from carbon monoxide poisoning. It's a reminder that even if you're experienced, you can still fall victim to things you can't even see coming.
It really makes you think, like what if they just camped somewhere else that night? Or if the weather had been just a little warmer, would they still be alive? I don't know. It's a tough one.
That's the thing about the Dyatlov Pass incident, isn't it? We could look at the evidence, talk about the theories, but we may never know for sure what happened that night.
And maybe that's what makes it so fascinating. It's a reminder that there are still mysteries out there, even with all our technology and knowledge.
It reminds us to be humble, right?
Yeah.
To be prepared
Yeah.
and to respect the power of nature. Because sometimes, even when we think we have all the answers,
Sometimes the mountains have other plans. Well said. That's going to do it for us today. But we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the Dyatlov Pass incident? Do you have a favorite theory? Head over to our social media and let us know what you think. Until next time, this has been The Deep Dive, signing off. And that's a wrap for this episode of The Deep Dive. I hope you enjoyed today's exploration into today's mystery, and that it gave you some valuable insights to think about. If you found this episode helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on all our future deep dives. As always, thanks for diving deep with us today. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.